Well, our little corner headed sud today, huh? Which would be an appropriate term, as the French had this properties for a long, long time. We're down around Crown Point. I was thinking on the way down here, I wonder what's more famous. Crown Point for its role in the French and Indian War and Revolutionary War, or Champy? Champy's pretty popular in this neck of the woods. Far in the distance is the Crown Point Bridge, and you've all heard about Bulwaga Bay. Well, to historians it seems like only yesterday, but it was 250 years ago, and things were pretty busy around this area. And had some things not turned out the way they did, this would be a part of Canada. And the program says, that was very nice of the drums to start up in the background just as we started. In observance of the 250th anniversary of the French and Indian War, and on the occasion of the 10th anniversary French and Indian War encampment event at this wonderful Crown Point State Historic Site, they're joined this year by participants from the Grand Encampment Confederation of the French and Indian War, and co-sponsorship of the New York State French and Indian War 250th Anniversary Commemoration Commission. So, Crown Point State Historic Site, people can visit at any time, but this weekend is a very special time. We're going to be talking with people, finding out what battles were fought here, what things happened 250 years and even more ago when this installation, the ruins of which we can see in the distance, was first built, what happened to it, whether any shots were actually fired on this site or whatever. You stay with us. I think you find this an historic program and an interesting one, as we recorded on a sunny Saturday on August 11th, 2007. Well, Johnny Horton's not here to sing about the Battle of New Orleans, so I guess we're going to have to talk about the Battle of Crown Point. Is it Greg?
It's Greg, yeah.
And what's the last name again?
Ritter, Greg Ritter.
Greg Ritter, not from the famous Ritter family.
No, unfortunately not.
Where are you from, Greg?
We're from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Here for the big encampment.
Here for the big encampment. We drove 5.5 hours to set up our field hospital and get into the action.
Is this your first time here?
This is my first time here to Crown Point. Yes, it is.
A lot of the guys have been coming back for 10 years.
Oh, yeah,
now.
Absolutely. Yep.
This weekend is a big weekend, and this year celebrating the 250th anniversary. It's great.
Yeah, it's great to see them all out.
You're really into the reenacting thing.
Oh, it's awesome. It's a great time.
Have you done it for a long time?
I have, and I'm a school teacher, so I use it heavily in my classroom.
There in Bethlehem?
Yeah, yep. So we get all the kids involved with hands-on, living history, which is the best way to teach.
There is no better way to do it than
That's for sure.
This is a rather awesome, gruesome-looking table here, but it's going to look worse after the battle, isn't it?
In about 1 hour from now, we'll have soldiers laying all over with all kinds of wounds and battle things that we need to take care of.
I should tell people that this is the British encampment.
That's correct.
And you got a table full of some pretty awesome weapons.
Yeah, weapons. I know. I think they're tools of healing.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, I think that's the general.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So what? This is a field hospital. So
this is the surgeon's table with all the surgeon's tools and so forth. In the back we have a whole apocryphy, and we do everything from childbirthing to battlefield wounds and regular health care all the way across.
Quite a few people will be here. This is going to be a sizable battle, and it's coming up as we're recording this. It's 1:33. I think it's scheduled for 2 o'clock.
That's correct. The troops will be forming up just minutes from now.
Will there be a little adrenaline rush?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When it comes in,
absolutely.
You try to make it as realistic as possible.
Absolutely. And when you hear those cannons firing off and the volleys of hundreds of muskets, yeah, you definitely get a rush. It's a lot of fun.
Do you teach history to kids all the time, or do you?
Yeah, I do that for a living. 7th grade.
7th grade. Oh, that's a perfect grade.
Oh yeah, it's perfect age. They're really into it.
But you teach other subjects besides history, don't you?
I do. We connect actual living history with language arts, reading, math, social studies, science, completely thematic. All the way around living history. Yeah, the kids really grasp a hold of it.
How about the local history? Because Bethlehem is a very historic place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where all the Moravians came through, and there was a beautiful Moravian hospital there. And, yeah, took care of the soldiers from Valley Forge in the Battle of Brandywine.
Well, we're talking about a little bit of history, a little bit before that.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
250 years ago, this place was humming. All the
Absolutely.
way up and down Lake Champlain, all the way down to Lake George and
You bet.
Lake Honduroga later on. And so you were very familiar. Oh, somebody started ahead of
You
time.
heard it.
I heard just before that, I heard, uh-oh. But this is great. How many people came up with you, Greg?
We have a group of 6 of us that work at the hospital.
Is this your only shot for the summer, or are you planning on?
Oh no, we'll do it all the way across the summer, fall, winter, you name it.
No kidding.
Coldest of temperatures and the hottest of temperatures, we do it.
Isn't that great? Do you make any of your own clothes? Or?
Oh yeah, everything is handmade, crafted, made to the time period.
Isn't that terrific? Well, I won't hold you up anymore because we're going to be walking around talking to people, but we'll be
Well, it's
back.
good to talk with you.
Well, we'll watch your saws work later
All right,
on.
sounds good.
See you later, Greg.
Take care.
Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, you're from these guys are from Bethlehem. You know
Yeah.
these guys
Oh, yes,
over
I
here?
do. Yes, I do know these guys. We've camped with them often.
Have you?
Yes, we have.
They brought 6 with them. How big a crew did you bring?
Let's see, 2, 6, 8, 11. Oh, and a couple extras straight in. So I'd say about 15 people. But we're from across quite a few states. Our group spreads out across about 6 states on the Upper East Coast. So we're a civilian group. We're the Colonial Living History Alliance. And because we're a civilian group, of course, we portray civilian. Everything from the servant, who this gentleman walking here is a Turkish servant, all the way up to his master, who is a shipbuilder, a wealthy owner, and he's walking away from us.
I can see him going down there.
And he has the large marquee on the end that's quite well decked out with all the furniture and the silver and all the finery of life.
You know, we don't think about having a civilian group for reenactments, but that must be so much fun for you guys.
It is. It is. A lot of us come out of a military background, and we're kind of retired military. You can do it for so long, and then it's just time to come in and relax a little bit. As well as having a civilian group, we can have families. This is my daughter walking towards us. This is Mackenzie.
Hi, Mackenzie. How are you? Great.
And we have a lot of kids in the group, everything from Donald, who's just a little over 1 year old, to my son, who is 19 and off at college, or otherwise he'd be with us now. But
So you're making a family affair.
exactly, and that's one reason why we went into the civilian as opposed to the military, because typically in a military camp you wouldn't have children with you. You may have a wife, you may have women who follow the camp and do work for the men, but you certainly wouldn't have your family along with you.
So how you were in the Army?
No. Originally,
Before?
well, I was in a fake army. I was in a civilian militia before I came in this, out of New Jersey.
So tell me how your interest evolved in this particular.
This actually came from my wife, who was born in the wrong century. She should have been born in the 18th century. She's actually a food historian, and she would work for various museums and historical sites doing cooking demonstrations. And out of that, we would go out to find the utensils and the type of things that were made and you can buy at these type of reenactments. And we got interested in the camping end of it, and it just grew from there. So.
Not a bad way to spend the summer, you know.
No, not at all. We're kind of like modern gypsies. We're out on the average about every other weekend.
Come on.
You know, about every other weekend. On average.
You're kidding me.
On average. Sometimes we'll spend some time at home, a few weeks at home, but then we'll be out 3 weekends in a row. And that'll start about the end of April and go all the way to the end of October. Halloween is our last time out.
That just makes perfect sense.
Yep. In fact, Halloween is Jacobsburg down in Pennsylvania, where we met these gentlemen.
No kidding.
The surgeon next door, and interesting show at Halloween for when you have a surgeon there.
Can you imagine? It's bad enough, going to be bad enough over there. It's a little bit gory, and the battle hasn't even started yet.
Well, when Halloween comes, it's they do a really good job.
So you guys are on the road a lot. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Usually it's just long weekend type of thing. We might set out on a Friday and try and get home by Sunday night, perhaps Sunday morning. Sunday night or Monday morning. This is a longer weekend for us. We came out here Thursday and won't go home till Monday.
Now, are you a real student of this part of history?
Not so much as my wife is. I just kind of go along for the ride. But I just like the camping aspect of it the most. So I camped all my life, and I always did the minimal camping, the minimalized camping, with all the modern equipment as small as possible. Now I do this as big as possible, huge marquees and furniture.
But have you visited the Adirondack region before?
Oh, yeah. We've been coming up in this area for about 5 years now.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
So you're pretty familiar with this.
Yep.
Nice country.
Yeah, well, we definitely like to come up here for the summer. Almost all of our reenactments are up here because we like to come up for just the scenery, the cooler weather, the nice nights, the stars. Meteor showers like last night.
Yeah. Well, we cover a lot of aspects of history because this area is steeped in many, many important facets of American history.
Exactly.
French history, British history, And in September, we commemorate the Battle of Plattsburgh, the Battle of Plattsburgh Bay.
That's right. I was reading about that.
September 11th. You should come back up.
Yeah, September 11th, I believe if it's not the weekend before, we'll be over in Oswego.
Okay.
Yeah, actually welcoming Prince Charlie home, the Scottish Prince Charlie home.
There we go. We know we know when we're outranked. That's for sure.
But yeah, I believe that's that weekend. So.
But you've made lasting friends, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of the French and Indian War is not as huge as say Revolutionary War or Civil War. So it's kind of an ingrown group, but they spread everywhere from Virginia all the way up into Maine, Vermont, and we all kind of know each other, and we get the rendezvous once, twice, 3 times a year. So it's become a big family. So.
But, it's the next big step. The Revolutionary period. This Crown Point and Ticonderoga and Lake George, all figured in the whole.
That's right.
Whole aspect.
That's right.
Of that
Absolutely.
Historical period for 20, 30 years after that.
Absolutely, and that's one reason why we like focusing on French and Indian War. To go up 20 years to the Revolutionary War, we can easily do because our clothing, even though it's older, is still correct for that period. Fashions did change, but I myself, I'm a jeans and t-shirt man, and that came from my teenage years, and here I am 50 years old and still wearing the same clothing. So it's not
works for me.
So it's very easy to have this 1950s clothing go right into the Revolutionary War because I would still be wearing the same fashion I wore as a young man.
That's
so,
great.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
We'll do it again before we leave. We'll say hello on the way by, and
Good.
thanks.
Good.
Have a great weekend.
All right, thank you.
See you later. Ted and Regine Schaefer, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm just terrific. That's Calvin Castine. We're from Hometown Cable. We love it here. We heard you were the richest people on the ground, so we had to stop by. What are we representing here, Ted?
What you're representing here is basically the way the higher-ranking military would have traveled,
What a way to go, huh?
or an aristocrat, somebody of importance with wealth. I guess the old saying is, if you got it, flaunt it.
You're flaunting it, Ted.
That's the way they traveled.
Isn't that great? Did you bring all this stuff with you?
Mm-hmm.
From where?
From Pennsylvania.
We got a whole contingent from Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Yep,
From Bethlehem all the way up
this whole
through.
row's almost all.
No kidding. You know all these people?
Yep,
Having visited them,
quite often.
what
Yeah.
kind of a vehicle are you driving that you can pack all this stuff in it?
Well, you talking 18th century? Okay. This would have all fit in one large freight or Conestoga wagon of the time period. I guess coming up here, it had been drawn by usually 4 horses. Of course, they used oxen too, but traveling this far north, horse travel would have been the way to go.
You just wouldn't think of a place like this being associated at a battle scene.
Well,
But why not?
Well, they did do commerce. I mean, there was a lot of trade going on and a lot of things that were happening that you had to supply, so forth. And
well, the military was shipping supplies down to the lake. Stuff was being brought up from Albany. As in all situations, the almighty dollar. That's why the English are here. That's why the French are here.
Well, as I've said to everybody I've interviewed so far today, these were very important times in history 250 years ago.
Yes, they
At
were.
any given day and any given battle, the tide could have changed.
Yep.
And we could have been French-speaking right here
Yes.
where we stand, right?
Yes, very
Well,
easily.
I don't know enough French to survive. So.
Neither do I. It would have. It could have swung either way. So.
Are you both fans of this period in history, or?
yeah, we like the 1750s a lot.
So you do a lot of.
We do a lot of
That's
research.
about all we do is the 1750s.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we don't.
Some
We don't.
people have different outfits for every
Right.
time period.
We
and-
Yeah,
have a few, but mainly our heart is usually right in this area. That's where most of our research is. We go back a little bit, but you always are researching backward to find out why they came to where they were at. Just like we are today. You're searching back how they were 250 years ago, they would have.
So it's not enough just to have the dress and the beautiful outfit that Ted's
No.
got here. You'd like to know, so you
want to
feel
know why
like you're
they,
there.
you know what? Yeah, right. You want to know why they dressed the way they did. You want to know why they did this the way they did. We have a lot of receipts, 18th century receipts that they
No
were
kidding.
particular. Yeah, they're particular about how they put something in order or how they did what, and you're like, why? And then when you try it, maybe a different way, you find out, oh, maybe they had something there.
Do you ever wonder why you get interested in this time period specifically? Maybe your own ancestry, or
Yeah, a lot of times your ancestors dictate. If you had say an officer in the British or French military out of your family, you'd be interested in it. I just myself like this time period because this is truly pretty much where the frontier started ending on this continent. Civilization moved fast from this point onward.
you're absolutely
The Age
right.
of Enlightenment is what they call
Yeah,
it. And that's
you
when it
think about it,
started.
and it's absolutely true. You just turned the light on for me. I can understand
it's just
why.
in a matter of time. It's just a few short years, and this country's completely settled.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You've just brought it all together with one sentence. A
Yep.
man of a few words, but that's absolutely true.
the frontier basically, in my way of thinking, ended at the French and Indian War because that is when this country was opened up, and then it went from there. In a few short years, Lewis and Clark's going to be going to.
And look at everybody's been talking about that lately.
Oh
huh?
yeah.
Reproductions of their map are going for
Right.
more than a few $1,000s.
Oh, yes.
These days.
Yeah, it's like I said, in a few short years, they're going to be going to the Pacific Ocean, and then from there, in my way of thinking, it's all downhill.
But research is important. I can understand why you'd want to really get into the character
Well,
by understanding the time.
Right. You have to know how they. I mean, we're just doing the romantic part of it. We don't actually go into the whole. Like we have our modern conveniences. I mean, we do have coolers and so forth, but because we don't relish food poisoning and things
I
like
can
that, and you
understand
know,
that too, yeah.
yes.
and to think of what they were going through, just their everyday thoughts.
How did
you
women
never
survive
knew.
childbirth? How did
Right.
anybody survive any catastrophic illness?
Right.
Well, the
Honestly,
fact is, a lot of times they didn't.
right. Honestly,
Bodies were different, but
Yeah.
we still.
if any of us was actually thrown into the 18th century situation, I would take a wild guess that 75% of us would not survive.
Yeah.
Because we are not adapted to their conditions.
Yeah.
We become antiseptic. We can't take the germs, the dirt. As far as being out on the frontier, we are not accustomed to living with death behind every tree. It's just another entirely different world.
It's a good way for people to think. You've given me a lot of good perspective, both of you people here, so that our viewers who will watch this in the months to come, as we're recording this in August of 2007, will get an idea, well, maybe I should read a little
Yes.
more about what history was like in the 18th century.
Yep.
We're a lot of us so caught up in the moment,
Right.
trying to earn a living and feed our kids and keep clothes on them, that we forget what our ancestors had to go through to get us here.
Right. And the things you see in museums, they don't the whole picture because a lot of it's the good pieces that are saved behind. You might see, so you can't picture the whole thing unless you actually try it yourself. Oh, this works, this doesn't work. This is why they did this. This is why they didn't do that.
How hard was it to decide what to put in this tent?
It was pretty difficult. For one, there was not too many people doing this side of the 18th century.
And I've never seen it, so you're right there.
For one thing, it's a lot of work.
It's always going on. There's
Oh.
pieces that are coming in, pieces that, well, maybe this one's better than that one. as we try things out, what works better.
I
But
think
doesn't.
I think it's fabulous. I think it's
Thank you.
very tasteful and wonderful. But I was just thinking, what do they have family fights over whether they're going to put that particular teapot over there on the
Yeah.
table? Well, you got to find the stuff first, and
Yeah,
this is, all
first
this
thing
stuff
you-
is authentic, right?
Right. Well, most everything in this tent is reproductions.
You could have fooled me.
One of the
I was going to bring the antique roadshow right in.
Well, a few pieces there are antiques, but those we can't use them. I mean, you'd be afraid with the lead
I see
and
what you
that.
mean.
So then we tried to search for the reproductions that we
Something
can
that looks
actually
authentic,
use.
yeah.
Yeah. So like a lot of people do go to the table and go pick it up. It's like, oh no, you know, we aren't using that one. It's just there. But
very few pieces of the original camp furniture have survived.
and
One of
Oh,
the
you understand why?
Yeah,
It was
Well,
used
you know,
every
so-
week.
it was used up.
Yeah.
you have to understand that it would have been new then. So if you're getting a piece that's original, it's not going to look brand new.
That
can
is
understand.
that is one of the big mistakes people make when they first get into this lifestyle, is they try to make things look like it's 250 years old, but in reality, to you, it would have been used barely or new
At that time.
at that
Or
time.
If you had a piece that would have old, it would have been from 1600.
Well, you've done a great job. We're going to leave you now because I hear the cannon are getting tuned up for the
Yep,
battle at
yep.
2 o'clock.
Yep, they're getting ready
What
to
a-
start.
Big one.
What a pleasure to meet you people
Thank you.
and to get your ideas and perspective on this whole thing. And I particularly like the chamber pot. I know I know a lot about those things.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Thanks a lot,
You
guys.
just dated
I
yourself.
love it. I love it. Ted and Regine, thanks so much.
Yep. Thank
Good
you.
luck and have a wonderful weekend, will
You
you?
too.
Have a good one.
It beats the rain, doesn't it?
Oh yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Couldn't ask for better weather.
No, you couldn't. We'll see you guys later.
All right.
Thanks again. Sailboats on Lake Champlain, cannon fire, musket fire in the background, the Crown Point Bridge, the history embedded in the crumbling walls of the Crown Point Fort, and the battle is underway. It's called the British Strike Back. It theoretically was to start at 2 o'clock. It's precisely 2 o'clock now, and during our last interview, we could hear the embryonic cannon fire, musket fire, so we know that the adrenaline was already flowing among these reenactors getting ready for what will be a 2-hour tactical today, tactical weapons demonstration. The British will advance, gaining full strength against the French, reorganizing to the right of the covered way, the Crown Point ruins. We talked about that. French concentrating together their artillery on the right flank with their troops in the covered way of the Crown Point ruins. British making several attempts to assault the French line frontally, each try a failure. British retire back to the redoubt. Fighting will gradually die down in about 2 hours, and the scouts will bring word to the French commander that the British Army has several French civilian prisoners. French officer is sent to the British for a bit of a parley. The British agree, and under the white truce flag, French and British commanders exchange prisoners, and that's what'll be happening for the next couple hours. Well, the tactical is well underway. It's 5 minutes after 2 in the afternoon on the 11th of August 2007. We're at the Crown Point Historic Site for the 10th annual reenactment commemorating the 250th anniversary of this period in the French and Indian War, a very important part in history. One of the cannon to our right just fired about 3 minutes ago, and a giant smoke ring about 12 feet in diameter went scurrying across the field. I found that so interesting. Of course, Calvin in his humor said, "A lucky strike cannon, huh? A lucky strike indeed." It might be a good idea at this point in the reenactment to talk a little bit about the history of this time period in the French and Indian War, Crown Point, formerly known as Fort St. Frederick. And I downloaded some of the historic history off the internet last night, thanks to the folks who put this all together in ushistory.com. And and I hope your ears are stronger than mine. Some of these cannon blasts are pretty good. But it all began in the years between 1731 and 1734, when the French built a fort at the south end of Lake Champlain near the border with Vermont. And you know how close the border is because the bridge is right behind us. It's situated on a Pennsylvania, not a Pennsylvania, but a peninsula that the French called Crown Point. And the new installation was named Fort St. Frederick, or Frederic, intended to protect the southern reaches of New France from British colonial expansion. The structure was remodeled and enlarged numerous times. And by the mid-1740s, it stood as an imposing stone fortress. There isn't a great deal of it remaining today, but use your imagination. Then we come to the 1750s, the French and Indian War. Crown Point and a number of its neighboring installations were the targets of at least 5 efforts that we know of by the British to wrest control of Lake Champlain from the French. We talk about the Battle of Lake George in 1755, when a general by the name of William Johnson got a group of 3,500 men, most of them colonial militia from New England and New York, and they marched north. Their eventual goal was to come up here and capture Fort St. Frederic. Any element of surprise the British anticipated was dashed by the French discovery of the English plans left behind after the defeat of Edward Braddock near Fort Duquesne in July. So, French commander Baron Dieskau departed from St. Frederic in September, engaged Johnson's army at the south end of Lac du Saint-Sacrement, the body of water the British preferred to call Lake George. And Johnson won a signal victory, one of the few in the conflict's early years, as a matter of fact, but gave up on a plan to come up here and attack St. Frederic, or Frederick. Instead, he concentrated on the construction of Fort William Henry, and George II was very happy about that and gratefully made Johnson a baron, appointed him sole superintendent of Indian affairs in the area. Then you move ahead a year to the Stowell-Winslow offensive of 1756. New British force under John Winslow prepared for a second effort to take the fort up here. But before that offensive got underway, guess what? Word arrived of the French victory at Fort Oswego. The British were afraid that an overwhelming French army would be assembled here in the Champlain Valley. So you know what they did? They canceled their plans. Then was the Webb Offensive, and this was almost precisely 250 years ago. Summer 1757. Timid General Daniel Webb, disheartened from trying to extend British control on the lakes, heard that a large force under Marquis de Montcalm was moving from this fort toward Fort William Henry, and so he left for the safety of Fort Edward, and the remaining British army was defeated by the French in a battle that has become known as the William Henry Massacre, and that would have been on yesterday, 250 years ago, on August 10th. Then, as you're watching this part of the battle, the Abercrombie failure, 1758. And that became the 4th attempt made by General James Abercrombie, who headed a combined army of nearly 14,000 men, and what has been called the most senseless assault on this fort. In July, repulsed, the British force retreated. Finally, what is called the Amherst Triumph, 1759. French had ample warning of the British offensive, but they were weakened by the reassignment of Montcalm to the defense of Quebec. And British General Geoffrey Amherst, hero of Louisbourg a year earlier, considered more talented than his predecessors. The French carefully evacuated the threat, decided to evacuate all their civilians from the area, and tried to destroy Carillon and St. Frederic to keep them out of British hands. And the triumphant Amherst renamed the former that's Carillon, Fort Ticonderoga, and the latter, right here, Crown Point. So, the British at this point controlled the Southern Lakes region. They were unable to pursue the retreating French because of the presence of a small French fleet on our own Lake Champlain. Amherst put his soldiers to work, reconstructed the captured forts, but those labors prevented the army from rendezvousing with James Wolfe up on the St. Lawrence River. So as we said before, Crown Point was initially called Fort Amherst, constructed right near the site of Fort St. Frederick, became the largest British fort in North America. To give you an idea, the ramparts reached 27 feet in height, and the new fort supported more than 100 cannon. The fort was never completed. And that brings us up to date to 248 to 250 years ago, and we're here for the reenactment. And it is impressive because these people worked very hard to make their uniforms and their firepower, even their cooking utensils, as authentic as possible. And most of them, I'm coming over, and most of them are amateur and many are very often professional historians, so they know their stuff, don't they?
And I'm sure every one of them would know the answer to this, but I believe James Fenimore Cooper's Last of the Mohegans was had a lot to do with that fort in Lake George, Fort William Henry, and that slaughter that we're talking about.
General, and who knew when I first read that as one of the great American classics as a small child, when we played a game called Authors as little kids, because we weren't allowed to play with regular playing cards, that someday I would be standing right here and doing this reenactment in the year 2007. It's a perfect day for it, isn't it, Cal?
It is. It's
nice breeze.
It's when we first arrived, it was very sunny and warm, but the clouds have come in. Temperature is great, and the clouds give us a nice respite from the sun. So it's beautiful, beautiful weather.
Yeah, it's been a good weekend. In real time, we recorded the Lake Champlain Bluegrass Festival in Alberg, Vermont, to show you how far our little corner cameras go in the course of a weekend. I'm really delighted that you decided to make this trip down here. It was well worth our while.
Yes, there's been a little bit of publicity about this here, not enough as far as I'm concerned. This should have been on everybody's hit list as a place to be this weekend. But there's always so many things to choose from. We got that Lake Champlain Bluegrass Festival going on even as we speak here. And over in Stowe, they've got their annual car show, and there's always so many things to choose from, places that we could go and cover and bring to people.
And there are things happening down in Lake George this weekend, but right here in Crown Point, it's a focus of a lot of activity, as you can see, and it's so neat to meet these reenactors from all over the country, isn't it?
Yes, I'm surprised they can get this many here with Lake George actually celebrating the 250th anniversary of that massacre. I'm surprised they can get this many reenactors to come here. But reenactors, as we find out every time we put that camera on and hold that microphone up, are such great people.
Wonderful people, a family, just like the bluegrass people. They're family.
Yep, and they're here showing history, living history, and this is, I think, important if we're going to understand what shaped this nation. And our part of this shaping of this nation was no small thing. We were, I think we've grown up not realizing how important this area was.
We were lucky, and I'm sure you were the same way in your early school days. My teachers were very careful to point out a lot, very strong on local history and American history. So these things were just, if I might use the term, wonderful legends to me as a young kid. But to be here all these, 60-some years later and actually stand on the very ground where these battles were fought, that to me is kind of neat.
And to see that there's hundreds and hundreds of reenactors here that think enough of this to spend their summers doing this kind of thing, I think is great.
And they're not just guys on the street, although there are some of those too. As people said, well, they had to have civilians too back in those days. but they had to have doctors, and they had to have teachers, and they had to have militiamen, they had to have people of rank, people of substance, and poor folks. Just what we might call them grunts out there with a rifle trying to defend their nation. And so many factions involved during the French and Indian War when you consider the French and the Indians and the British and the young people who were trying to set up housekeeping in this area back in the early days.
Well, as we have learned, one of the first things that Samuel D. Champlain did when he came down here in 1609, another guy just bit the dust.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
I think he fell backing up. I don't know if he got shot. I think he just accidentally fell.
I think he said, "Take my gun and hand me a Mountain Dew."
But one of the first things Samuel D. Champlain did was get in the middle of the Indian fights, and
Sure
he
did.
made a lot of enemies for the French in his first trip down Lake Champlain, and those animosities remained, and in some cases still remain. If you talk to our good friends from Caughnawaga and so on, they all speak English. Very few Indians and Native Americans speak French.
And that tells you, gives you a little bit of insight into why. I think it behooves all of us to learn a little bit more about our history. I hope we don't become a part of the battle here if these guys keep retreating any farther.
We're embedded reporters here.
Oh, we are. think about that.
We're not from CNN or Fox. We're from HTC.
We were walking around yesterday and somebody said to Kelvin, "How many gigabytes is that card in that camera?" Never mind, we're still on tape here, folks.
Yeah. This is.
But it's great to capture it for
video.
all time, isn't it?
It is, and this is something that goes on every year, and I think we're going to have to consider coming back sometime in the years to come.
Well, tragically for our little corner viewers and for you and me, we've never brought our tape recorders down to Fort Ticonderoga, and we
No.
want to do that.
We want to do that this year. We were in Lake George last year, and we didn't. You had to get back. We didn't have time to go to the fort. Maybe going to do that this year. If not this year, certainly next year, go to that fort in Lake George, and we'd like to have a record that our viewers can enjoy and have at their disposal. If they want to buy a copy or tape it off the TV when it's on, they can learn a lot about the history of our country, because you and I are learning every time we come out here.
Oh, we do. And I do the research online as a quick study and try to remember enough of it to talk with some intelligence the day we do the event. But to have this as a piece of history, wouldn't you like to be able to supply these reenactors and their families with copies of this? They would love it if there were a way to do it.
I would think that many of them would. It's hopefully and I think it does. We do have that impact. I think when a lot of people see the historical stuff that we are able to bring, that it does inspire them to learn more about the area's history. So they do buy those local history books, and they do seek that out. And I think that's important.
You know, it was neat for me as you and I walked down from our parking area right out in the middle of a field, about a quarter of a mile away from where we're standing now. We saw elderly senior citizens with their walkers and canes. We saw small toe-headed children
Right here, we got
sitting
three
right here to our left, enjoying every minute of it. So we're spanning the ages in more ways than one here, aren't we today?
Yes, and I'm sure when these kids right here get to the point in school where they're learning about the French and Indian War, they're going to be paying close attention, and they're going to be telling their teacher a few things.
Isn't it great? And speaking of teachers, we had a young teacher from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, who was here, who will take this knowledge back to his students, and those kids in 7th grade are going to love it this fall, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. You know, it must be nice to learn from a teacher like that. And on our way down here, we passed through Westport, and as I've recently found out from one of the sources in my library, according to that source, in 1760, the split rock of Westport was designated the boundary between the area that the English claimed and the area that the French claimed. And that really wasn't too disputed until about 1774, when Revolutionary War sabers started rattling. So as we have alluded to, it's very possible that from Westport on up could now, if history had been different, could now be a part of Canada. We could, you and I probably wouldn't be living there, or if we were, we'd be living there as Canadians.
Yeah, and a lot of those important times in history, as it was so graphically and lucidly presented by the guy we talked to last as being, the last of the real frontiers here on the East Coast, because things changed so dramatically. And one important period of time melded right into the Revolutionary War, which just a few years later, and a couple of years after that, the Great American Civil War. And so here we are in 2007, trying to finish up other conflicts in the far corners of the world. It's amazing.
Yeah, and again, the route that Lake Champlain was, to the north-south route, and then tying that all in was the Erie Canal and the Champlain Canal.
Oh,
and
yes.
That's another piece of history that we are going to explore further as Hometown Cable continues its coverage of the area and the region.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of that, and we had a lot of fun over at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. There are so many things around Lake Champlain, so don't tell me that your family has nothing to do and that the kids are saying it's boring in the summertime. Just pay attention to what's going on around you, and maybe the next time one of these events comes up, you can bring the whole family and get a little education as well as some fun.
Well, we should tell people we didn't pay for our parking because we're here to cover it, but parking is $5 for a car full.
Think about it.
A car full of folks for $5. That's it. You park, you pay $5, and everybody can just come in and enjoy all this.
Go to some major attractions where it costs you $50 a ticket, right?
Yeah.
And
You bring
$6 for a hot dog.
Yeah. You bring a lunch and pay $5, and you got a car full of kids, and you can see all this, tour the grounds. It's a heck of a bargain. The people that I feel sorry for right now, Gordy, are these early casualties.
Yeah. This one guy I love, he's getting his digital camera out. He's going to take a shot. He's deader than heck, but he's setting up his digital camera, and he's going to take a picture of the battlefield.
Or he's got his, I think it's a cell phone. He's going to have one of those cell phone shots. He's probably calling home saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm dead.
I'm dead, but here I am." Oh, we make light of it, but this is important stuff for these people. It's what a great way to spend a summer. A lot of people who are teachers and have other jobs, and they can take weekends off, do the reenacting, and we do have some friends of ours who reenact in the Battle of Plattsburgh time period, a much later time period from the War of 1812, and we're talking closer to 1814 in our area, are down in here with entirely different uniforms helping out today, so that's kind of neat. And we talked to a few of the people. Don Craig and Keith Herculow and the crowd took the Rooster, that wonderful bateau, down to Sackett's Harbor recently, and we got some drums.
And the people who are on the French side do try to stay in character, and they are over there speaking French. So I don't know if that's their native tongue or if they learned just for this year. But
I don't know, maybe it's just as well that we're not close enough to hear. Yeah, I think I just heard in French, touch it off.
And every year while we're doing the Battle of Plattsburgh, the Fort Ticonderoga has a similar type of thing going on down there. It's unfortunate that it happens at the same time period, but if you want to see a different type of reenactment, right around that September 11th time period, Fort Ticonderoga has a French and Indian War type of thing going on at the fort.
Yeah, you mentioned $5 to park. There are a lot of these areas across northern New York, along the St. Lawrence River, up in Canada and Quebec, and over in Ontario. Historic sites that are open to the public around the year that you can visit with your family for very little or no money and get a tremendous education. Well, Lake George, just a wonderful community, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. And I'm watching them carry the wounded off the field here.
Yeah. They're not helping at all.
Well,
are they?
he's guys kicking his feet here. He's helping a little
he
bit.
is?
He's helping to back up. But
Yeah, okay.
as I think it was explained to us off camera before we started taping the medics, there was no field medics at that time.
No mass
no
units.
mass units out here. When the people were wounded, they stayed there till the battle was over. So if you're shot early on, you could be dead by the time you could help got to you.
Absolutely.
You could
And
have had a treatable injury and not have survived.
those who study the horrors of war know how it was during American Civil War and how horrible those battle scenes were down in Gettysburg and elsewhere. And the word MASH wasn't even invented until the Korean conflict. And yet, Dr. de Grand Prix so colorfully has illustrated to us in our slide presentation where he remembered the name of every person. He certainly was a part of what we would now call MASH units, wasn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I guess the medics that we're familiar with that are out there on the line working with these folks didn't, according to what we were told today, didn't really happen until about the time of World War I.
Yeah. So here we are in a modern era, but even in the Korean conflict, things were a lot less organized than they are now on the battlefield. So you know that things were really tremendously primitive around this time period. We've seen a few Native Americans, Indians involved, and we've seen the French, and we've seen the British. There seems to be a lull in the action right now.
Maybe it's tea time. The British did like to
you
stop and
think
have
so?
tea. Yes. I'm not sure what they're doing here. It's only 2:30. They've only been fighting for half an hour.
I don't know if that's a flag or a scalp going across the field right there. I was trying to see what was on the end of that pole. Some kind of a ceremony, perhaps, huh?
It's possible. They may. Looks like the blue coats and the red coats are getting together over there. They're exchanging women. I don't know. I've seen some women running in this direction, so I don't know.
Well, you were
Exchanging
absolutely right when you say perhaps not enough publicity. Because as I look around, what would you say? A couple hundred people, maybe?
Yeah, there's not many more viewers than there are reenactors, and that's unfortunate. I think it'd be. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice.
That's all right.
It behooves the folks in our region to come to something like this here, and behooves the media to give some free publicity. The only way I found this was in a paid ad, and I saw a couple of paid ads, but there should be coverage of this before and after, and I think it behooves the media to promote this kind of activity.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure for us to be here today, and many of the people, the reactors, the other reenactors from the British site and the French sites behind us have come down here to view the battle in their native garb, and they'll get back to their previous occupations when the battle is over.
Yes, as we found out from our coverage of the Battle of Plattsburgh, people did come and watch some of these skirmishes.
Didn't they, though? Yeah. You want to go down to Plattsburgh today? I hear they're going to duke it out in the bay.
There probably weren't too many civilians around that weren't with the troops, though, in the 1750s and so on. I don't think we're too heavily populated around here, so I don't think there were too many. But obviously, if you were a few miles away and you heard the gunfire, you might make a trip through the woods to find out what the heck was going on.
They were aware of it over in Vermont, because there was a lot of shipbuilding going on in Vermont on that side of the lake, and they certainly were aware of it up and down there. Like, things happen so slowly, you wonder how they could keep any secrets from anybody. You know that phrase, "The British is coming, the British are coming, the British are coming." How could you not know when there's 10,000 troops on the road? You know.
Well, as one of the things we've learned is that the Battle of New Orleans actually took place when, for all practical purposes, the war was over.
It was won, yeah.
The word just didn't get around. It took a long time to get the word from here to there. And it looks like the dead are rising here, so either we're going to have another skirmish, maybe a different skirmish. I think you read that there might be a couple different battles taking place. So we might have another brand new skirmish, and these reenactors will miraculously come to life and live to fight another day.
Rise to fight again, huh? And apparently that part of the battle is finished. And as we said earlier, the scouts brought word to the French commander that the British Army had several French civilian prisoners. A French officer was sent to the British for a parley. They had their chat, as we saw. The British agree, and under the white flag, the French and British commanders exchanged prisoners, and theoretically, this would be the 4 o'clock moment, I think, when the British strike back tactical ends and the troops march back to their camps. And this will give us an opportunity to have a chat with some of these reenactors to find out who they are, where they come from, and just why they have this tremendous interest. Well, the Indians are going a little ballistic down here. Everybody's breaking up and heading back. This is a beautiful spot as we look at the mountains around us. You know, they take time to enjoy the natural history. Oh, I hear a fife behind me somewhere and drums as they march. The sound effects are great, aren't they?
Yep. Oh, yep, we got more coming through here.
Some of these faces are familiar. I think I've seen some of these reenactors. I love the uniforms. Just great. That little boy says, "Where are the French?" He's seen enough Indians and British. He wants to know where the French are. We got some Indians behind us here coming up through. Little one behind me says, "Where are the Yankees?" Playing Cleveland tonight at 7 o'clock.
Where's Sid Couchy? He's an Indians fan.
Yeah, he sure is.
Should have brought Sid along with us today.
Oh, he would have liked it. He would have drawn the whole thing in cartoon fashion, wouldn't he? This is an actual vista here, you know. Wherever you go, you're drinking in North Country Adirondack region beauty. You're looking at the redoubt. You're looking at what remains of the fort. You're looking at the mountains on one side, the lake on the other, the Crown Point Bridge, and in this area, like a small valley, in the open sloped fields, where battles were fought then, they're being fought in reenactment in the year 2007. And you said this historic site covered how many acres?
Tom Hughes, when I talked to him, said that it was over 300 acres here.
Wow. Certainly is a good spot, and we would encourage anybody of any age to get their family together and come on down here and visit Crown Point. These historic sites deserve to be far better attended than they are, that's for sure.
And it's 20 miles once you get off the Northway.
20 miles.
20 miles. The sign there in Westport says 20 miles to the bridge. No, that's where we are. We're 20 miles away. Let's see if these folks here will chat with us.
No, they might just do that. All right, we're underway again. Well, the battle is over. How does it feel?
Yeah, no, it's exhilarating. It's a lot of fun to recreate, what was here in this area so many years ago.
How long are you going to leave on your face?
I'll go clean up now.
Are you?
Yeah, we have we'll dance tonight, music, sing.
Oh, no kidding.
So get ready for that, get fixed up.
So where are you folks from?
Well, actually, I'm from Wisconsin. And
Come on.
my friend Zach is from South Dakota.
How are you?
Yep.
Great. Good to see you.
So, yeah, we came out for this event. So,
No kidding.
yeah,
First time in this region?
Yep. Yeah, never been up in this part of the country, so it's just beautiful.
Well, welcome. What's your name?
David.
David.
Yep.
What do you
This
do
is
back home?
I'm an engineer.
Are you
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Don't you love it? Who's this here?
My son Adam.
Adam, how are you?
And this is Maeve.
Hi, Maeve.
So we all travel.
Who did the haircut?
My dad.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right after school's out, he gets the mohawk.
You gotta do it.
So,
Uh-oh. Somebody fell here behind us with the cannon.
he's
He's
good.
all right.
it's just invite.
There's a lot of holes in here as they're trying to
Yeah.
drag these cannon across.
Yeah, you got to be. Some of them are up to 6 feet deep.
Oh, sure. Wisconsin.
Yep.
How the heck did you ever hear about
Well,
this reenactment?
This event only is held every 2 or 3 years. Grand encampment. Last 3 years ago, I was in Detroit, so it moves around, and so we were out there in Detroit, and we knew it was going to be here. So, plus we study so much, we know the history of all these areas, but we haven't seen them yet. So it was great to come out.
Was
and
it a kick?
Visit it. Oh yeah.
Was
We went
it,
down
was
to
it
Fort Ty.
exactly as you expected it to be?
Well, nothing is exactly, I guess,
No.
but in my mind, I'm seeing the way it was, so it's good to see. I like the Crown Point here because it's not, it's neat to see it completely rebuilt, but it's also neat to see it as it is, in ruins. We came up last night and just kind of looked around a bit. It's really neat.
Did you arrive yesterday?
No, we came up last Thursday. We were over in New
Oh,
Hampshire, Fort
good.
number 4. Went to that one and then spent the rest of the week here.
So what kind of engineering?
Plastics.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Is it that neat?
What
So-
nation are you?
Well, I recreate or do Ojibwe, Anishinaabe. For myself, I know I have some native blood, but I don't know what. The records are gone. In mid-1850, if you could pass yourself off white in Wisconsin, you did, because it was a very bad time
Oh, sure.
for natives there. Forced removal of kids from homes and things. So a lot of times you want to keep your kids, and you could pass yourself off as white. So you change records, but they're coming in. So yeah, that was fun. We came right out behind the British, and I ambushed them from behind there. And the natives, the natives they had didn't expect that. So
That's
good.
Isn't this a big kick?
oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And to reenact it the best you can is make it historically accurate if you can.
It's possible.
Now, do you do a lot of reenacting?
Reenacting? Yes. Yeah, about
You do?
one event a month, and then sometimes more than that.
Some of these
But as
guys
much as
go
the
almost
schedule.
every weekend. We met a contingent of about 100 people from Pennsylvania.
Yep.
They range from, we haven't met an engineer yet today, but
Yeah.
we met school teachers and doctors and
Oh yeah.
just guys
Yep.
off the street who love this part of history.
Oh yeah. Yep. Well, and that's with this hobby. It's not just dressing up and running around. It's hours and hours and hours of research.
We learned that today.
You talk to any
in
of the guys
library,
and-
on the internet.
Yeah, just constant, and of course talking to others at events like this. And right now I'm almost to the point of just reading only firsthand account documentation, because you really, in order to really get the right information, you got to take it right from. And then even you have to consider who was writing it then, because they might have a bias that might.
No kidding.
Check that.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Make
Has there
the
ever been a
information-
first-hand account that I wasn't biased in some way?
Oh sure.
Sure it was.
Yep. Yep.
Your nation was up around the Great Lakes, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anishinaabe, and they moved west in the mid-late 1600s. Pushed the Dakota out, and the Fox and the Sauk and the Menominee pushed them out of the northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota. So they inhabited all the south side of Lake Superior, north side, and then also all the way east. They're Algonquin people,
sure.
so the same people group as like the Huron, the Abenaki, and others. So a lot of the words, we've been trading words back and forth. Word
You're
for,
learning the language?
Oh yes, yeah.
Come on.
I need Eja Yaya Niji. Means hello, how are you, my friend?
Oh, I love it.
So there's our Hanin Chimokoman, which is Chimokoman is the word for long knives or Americans. So
Isn't
yeah,
that neat? So how much of the language are you learning?
enough that I can talk in camp and give an impression. So I probably have about 200 words,
No kidding.
maybe, that I can use.
Wow.
So out in the field, they yell "Iko ga ni ma Chimokoman," which means "Get out of here."
I love it. I love it. So where to next after this? You're going to stay for the weekend.
Yep, we'll be heading back home on Monday. So.
Your job's going to be seem a little bit mundane after all of this,
Oh yeah,
isn't
always
it?
does.
Isn't it
yeah,
amazing?
always does. So.
Isn't it great to grow up and still play?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Huh?
Yep.
When
Well,
you're-
that's I'm excited with Adam's getting experiences now with me that most kids would never see or even imagine. They're busy playing a video game, and he's out here doing the real thing.
Isn't that the way it ought to be? Are you having a good time?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's so cool with almost no hair on your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you would know.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, have a good weekend. Have a great trip back home. And maybe we'll see you at another one of these
Oh,
sometime.
I'm most
Who
likely.
knows?
We're going to
It's-
be at Fort Ty next year.
Are you really?
Yeah,
well,
it's
we
gonna
want to go
be
to
a
Fort
great
Ty either next year or
Well, next
earlier.
year is the 250th anniversary
Oh, yes.
of the attack on Fort Carillon. So
Yep.
that'll, because 1758.
Yep. Isn't
So
that
it's going to
great?
be huge. They're building breastworks in a whole area. Be the largest on the site in this area, built for a reenactment. Now they've got it working on it now for next year.
This is a great spot for a reenactment, isn't it?
Yep.
Just the lay of
That's
the
good.
land. And I was just looking around here trying to drink in all the scenery with that magnificent Lake Champlain and
Yep.
Vermont right across the bridge, and the ruins in the background. And like you said, it's nice to walk in and see something that hasn't been overproduced. You
Right.
know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
I love it. Thanks so much. We won't tie you up. Have a great day. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
See you later, guys.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I love it.
Goodbye. See you again.
See you again. Oh, this is the aftermath. I hear a little light music in the background, and isn't it great? Tom Hughes, right?
Yes.
Great to see you finally.
Well,
Talk
thanks for
about
calling.
one-armed paper hangers. You've been going crazy here today.
Me and so many others. We've got these hundreds and hundreds of French and British and Indian and even boat reenactors, boaters, or bateaumen. And they had 2 battles already today. They got another one tomorrow. So they've been literally running around like crazy, and it's been so gratifying to us because the public came out and they saw a really entertaining tactical weapons demonstration. There was no Battle of Crown Point, so they sort of made up a battle scenario and executed it right in front of the public where you could smell it, almost taste it, see everything.
But it was also, besides being entertaining, it was tremendously educational to come up here today to talk to all the reenactors. First of all, Tom, I want to know what do you have a title here?
Yep.
And?
Historic Site Manager. I agree it was entertaining. Not only do we have all the museum exhibits and the models of the forts to show what these ruins are all about, but there was narration, a good narrator for the battle. And when you weren't concentrating on the sound of the muskets and the cannon, he was pointing out, a lot to help people understand what really they're watching, and I think that's really good. And why, as you were saying, you're getting the multi-generational, intergenerational visitation. I love that when people make a family day of it, and grandparents will take the grandchildren, because frankly, that's a memory. That's not just
Are you kidding?
something to do. That's a memory together.
And we, as I said before, I get back to this group that was part of the Indian faction who came here from Wisconsin, and from the little kids to the females to the cousins, they come as a family group and go to the reenactments, and they were as excited as we were just to be here standing on this spot today, and I thought that was so neat. I hope I didn't force somebody off the side of the mountain here.
There's a power in being in the place, the authentic place.
Come on, of course.
Yep.
Discovery Channel is wonderful. The History Channel is wonderful, but there's nothing quite like being
You can't.
there.
You can't put your historic site on a website and really satisfy. When people come, then it all comes together.
And you know what many of our viewers on Hometown Cable don't know is that this place is open other than during this grand reenactment weekend, isn't it?
6 months of the year, all the way from the beginning of May till Halloween, every day of the week except Tuesday. So there's plenty of opportunity to come, and we love to show people the place.
And it's not expensive.
No, actually on the weekends for a motorized vehicle, it's $5, and when it's not Saturday or Sunday, the top fee at the museum is $3. So
Think about that, folks.
yeah.
When you're saving your next money
Well,
to go to Florida.
It's nothing like the cost of a trip to the movies.
Yeah. But isn't it amazing? I just wrote a column on what the price of popcorn in movie theaters.
There's a big markup there.
Now, so on a regular basis, what happens on a daily basis here?
Well, people park actually very close to the museum and look around, usually first to see the exhibits, because understanding what the forts looked like before they became ruins back in the 18th century is very helpful for when they go outside with the walking tour or a guide sometimes to show them the ruins themselves. Of what? Well, of both a French fort that was a fort from 1734 when they began construction until 1759 when the British were arriving and the French abandoned and blew up their fort. So for 25 years, the British wanted Fort St. Frederick here, and they finally got it. And when they did,
After 5 tries?
right. When they finally did, they made the most of it. They built this enormous British fort. It actually encloses 6 acres. It's got a 5-acre parade ground. So they built a huge fort.
The biggest at the
huge.
time, right?
Yep. And it's got 3 redoubts, about 500 yards apiece. I'm looking at Gage's redoubt in the distance in the clearing. And then 4 blockhouses further south down the neck of this Crown Point Peninsula. But that wasn't all. They not only at the same time that the British under General Amherst built all of that here, they also built a fleet in the lake. Now that they had this, they wanted to control all of Lake Champlain, of course. And they built a 77.5-mile road called the Crown Point Road that goes diagonally across Vermont to connect this fort to the fort at number 4 in Charlestown, New Hampshire. That was a lot, but once they finally had their prize, they wanted to make the very most of it.
And they certainly did. I didn't ask you, how did you get, what a neat job you had. Where did you go? I mean, tell me a little bit about your childhood around here.
Yep. Yes, I grew up in Rutland County, attended Castleton State College and then the University of Connecticut. But even before I got to grad school, I started working at a historic site for the first time 30 years ago at the Hubbardton Battlefield.
Oh, yeah.
A beautiful place,
Oh,
as
yeah.
you know. And then worked for 24 years at a George Washington site in the Hudson Valley before coming
You
here.
got to get that? Hold on a
Sorry.
second. Well, hold on. We're back again. We paused to answer a 21st century telephone call right now. But, so you went to college, you went to grad school, and
worked at that George Washington site in the Hudson Valley. So ask me a question about George Washington. There's still a lot I need to learn about the French and Indian War, but I'm loving this. You know, I'm basically moving one war earlier in history, and so there's a learning curve.
yeah. So you came up here and got this job, advertised.
Well, there was an opening, and I got to tell you, as soon as I found out there was an opening, I couldn't stop thinking about it. You know, every day I'm like, Crown Point, wouldn't that be nice? It is.
All you have to do, as you said before, take 360 degrees and look around this camera and tell me that this wouldn't be a really neat place to spend my professional life as well as my weekends.
Well, we get a nice breeze we're experiencing right now off the lake, so it is a pretty place.
I want people to know how big a deal this weekend is for you. It's a long time in the planning, isn't it?
Yep. Yes, it is. This is our 10th annual French and Indian War encampment weekend. Never, of course, observing the Battle of Crown Point, because there really wasn't one. 2 great forts, but no battle, no significant battle. And on top of that, this is the third of a series of events that happens one every 3 years. So the one 3 years ago was in Michigan, for instance, and we're lucky enough that they picked here to have an event called the Third Grand Encampment. There's an organization called
and
that.
It is a grand encampment.
Yep, and it's funny too, because in French, the word grand means big.
Yeah.
So it was bigger this year because so many came from further away, and so I publicized it to try and let everybody know that we're going to do something special. And these reenactors, these wonderful volunteers, have made it very special, I think.
Well, as amateurs, and we do a lot of historic things by interviewing bright people like you, makes us look good. We're duly impressed, not only with the facility, but with you and everybody we've talked to so far. This is going to be the highlight of a lot of people's lives being here today. And you talk about being entertained and educated. I didn't see anybody going out of here who wasn't just jawing away at, wow, did you see that? Did you hear that, Ken? Did you see that?
I think,
Little
yeah.
kid says, where's the Yankees? I loved it. So
Yep.
this is a good day for you. And
Yeah,
are you going to take a little break after this weekend? Or you're going to, no, he's taking a deep breath and sighing.
All these meetings coming up next week to get ready for it. Yep.
Now, right now, he's got to go down to the museum and make sure some good pictures are taken, right?
That's right.
Tom, great to see you. Perhaps
Thank
we'll
you.
see you down at the museum. Have a great day.
Thanks.
For allowing us to come here today.
I appreciate all this
We love
positive
every
interest.
minute of
Thank
it.
you.
Another country heard from Larry
Hevron,
Haverin from Lexington, Kentucky.
Lexington, Kentucky.
Well, we're going to cover the whole globe if we keep it up here today. You look like you've been through a tough battle.
Yeah, we have. We've been out twice today and had a pretty good time at it, even though it was hot.
I wonder how many people who were up at here 250 years ago talked with that wonderful accent.
I bet none did.
What brings you up here besides you just heard about this big event?
Well, this is the Grand Encampment. This is one of the biggest events in the realm of French and Indian War reenacting, and we heard about it earlier this year, and I had been here in 2004. Just,
you were?
Yeah,
To look around?
Yeah, just visiting, doing some historical touring, and encouraged our guys to show up to this event because of the site itself.
How many people came from your
Actually,
place?
just me and one other guy.
Oh, you didn't get the word out very good.
Well, we did. We got the word out really well, but 900 miles scares a lot of people
It
off.
certainly is. Was it worth the trip?
I love it. Yeah, this is a great place.
When did you get here? Yesterday?
We got here Thursday evening, so we've been here since Thursday evening, and we're going to be taking off tomorrow morning.
Oh, you're going to miss the second day.
Yeah, we've got to. We've got to get a fair chance at a good night's rest for work on Monday.
What's work for you?
I actually work for a company that reclaims wood from buildings that are going to be demolished. We take barn siding and barn timbers and warehouse timbers and boards and remanufacture that into hardwood flooring.
Isn't that? I've heard everything. We got a guy who's a plastics engineer. It's wonderful. But why reenacting for you? Where did this all start?
It started from really the very beginning of it was growing up with my family. Mom and Dad taking me around. At the time, it was dragging me around a historic site.
Isn't that the way it is when you're a little kid?
Yeah, but
have to?
That's one component of it, and the other component of it is I spent many years in Boy Scouts and got my Eagle Scout, and I spent lots of
Did
time
you really?
backpacking and things like
Congratulations.
that.
No small feat.
And with all the amount of time we spent backpacking in places kind of similar to this, it just got to a point with all the modern gear, it was a little easy. And I was kind of curious as to how it was done 200 years ago to know just what people had to do, what kind of gear they had, and what kind of lives they had to live. So this is, just a means of exploring the life one lived being in the military in the 1750s.
It was tough enough to live 250
That's
years
exactly
ago
right.
in a quiet place.
Yeah,
But if you were a soldier,
right.
wow.
It was tough. It would have been unbelievable. And I don't see how there's so many people that actually went from serving in the French and Indian War to actually volunteering for service in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, not that many years later.
Yeah,
We've
it's
talked
not.
about that because this whole area played a major part in that war too.
Yeah, it did.
Well, we're delighted to have you up here today. We hope you're having a good time.
We are.
Yeah, are you? Yeah, tell us a little bit about what this costume
Well, this costume, I'm a soldier in Montgomery's 1st Highland
Right.
Battalion, the 77th Highland Regiment. The tartan we're wearing is the Black Watch. Our stockings, a red uniform, coat, and waistcoat. We've got our belly box here, which holds cartridges, and there's not any in there right
Car keys,
now.
too.
Yeah, car keys too.
Yeah, that's important.
This is our Brown Bess musket.
Yep.
And we're actually a grenadier unit, and this is our grenadier miter that distinguishes us from a regular line soldier on the line.
You didn't roll around the dirt today, did you?
No, not really. This is all just sweat, and then this is a little bit of powder burn right here. So
You've never been injured in the line of duty here?
not yet. Not bad enough that I can't walk home.
Oh, but isn't it fun?
It is a lot of fun. I enjoy it a lot.
Are you a real student of this time period in history, or?
Yeah, I mean, I love this period of time, and one of the things that I have a greater interest beyond just the history of soldiering. I have an interest in what it's like to be just a farmer in this period of time, and what all walks of life did. I'm a really big fan of old trades and have learned a few trades in basic terms, but it's just the life people had to live back then is very intriguing.
Well, it's the foundation that our country today
Yeah.
is built on in this area and in Lexington too. you know?
Right.
So, do you live in a rural area down there? Or do you live right
I do.
in this?
I do live in a rural part of the Lexington area on an old horse farm, but
Oh, great!
there's a lot of settlement area history in that part of Kentucky. It's pretty much the jumping off point where all of settlement started.
Absolutely.
I live about 20 miles away from Fort Boonesboro,
Oh boy!
and I actually live within a mile of Bryan Station, which was was one of the first major battle sites in the frontier battles of the Revolutionary War. And actually, I think this weekend is the 225th anniversary of the Battle of the Blue Licks.
You better get home.
Yeah, I know it. I'm missing one right now.
You're missing all the blue licks. Well, you know what? I hope it was worthwhile for you.
Oh, it was.
It's a real
Yeah.
kick for us to watch it, to interview neat people like
Yeah.
you, Larry.
Yeah.
Have a great trip home.
Appreciate
tomorrow, will
it.
you?
Thanks a lot. Good talking
with
to you.
We might make it down to the museum, and we might not. We just have to stop and chat with people. Nick and Mary Padula.
Yes, Padula.
Now, where are you from?
Oh, we're from Sullivan County, Pennsylvania.
Well, you know, another county in Pennsylvania I heard from.
Yeah.
See, there's plenty of them around.
Plenty around.
Lots of people from Pennsylvania up here today.
Oh yeah, most of our contingent Company LeBoeuf is from Erie.
Company LeBoeuf.
Company LeBoeuf out of
PA,
Western
most of
Pennsylvania.
us.
All right. Well, just tell us a little bit about your garb and what you're representing.
This is obviously we're French, so we dress a little better than those Brits down the road.
Oh, I noticed that. Yeah.
Oh, people don't realize the amount of color
Yeah.
that people in the 1750s wore.
Sure.
There was a big trading. Everything was traded for, and all your color and most of your clothing and patterns and stuff were coming out of India, China, Japan. You know, it was not uncommon for Persian rugs and stuff to be there. So it was more common to see colors like this than black.
I love it.
And most of the time, right, they just would match color, not patterns. So you would find somebody with 2-inch polka dots with stripes, but the colors matched. A lot of people say, God, they dress like they did in 1960.
Is it?
But they dressed very, very colorful. You could tell where the origin of the people by the way they dress, by their clothing. Like German girls would, like if you looked at the bottom of my wife's petticoat, there's some ribbon around the part that indicated German.
Does it
Where
really? Who would
that
know?
whole
Who
area.
would know that unless I ran into you?
Well,
Exactly.
I'm a tinker peddler by trade. That's my persona. So which is here for them today.
Yeah, it's a good. I was just thinking how comfortable you look. Some of us are comfortable in our skin, and some of us are comfortable in our garb, and you look like.
Well, a lot of people
step right back 250 years.
Hopefully. Most of the people, your common question all the time is, aren't you dying of heat in these clothing?
No, today's beautiful.
Oh,
But it's a beautiful
day.
day, and all your clothing is made out of natural fiber. And you cool
Natural
yourself
fiber breathes very nicely.
easily.
You
And
look like you're breathing very well.
Oh,
you were
we're
really
breathing
trucking
good.
up here
Yeah.
before
Yes,
Calvin
we
stood in the
were.
way and said, "Hey, would these people like to talk to us?" Have you been reenacting for a long time, or?
For about 10
10
years.
years or so.
We started as a British contingent,
Oh,
and
did
then
you?
we moved to Pennsylvania.
Well, we found out
and we
we
joined the French because as a tinker, he would really travel between any nationality.
Of
so
course
that
he would.
today he might be pro-Brit, tomorrow he might be pro.
Whatever
French.
pays the
whatever.
bills.
That's
Better
right.
believe
Tinker,
it.
you got that
And
right.
that's why our clothing also is kind of a hodgepodge. This would be French. It would be the colors, the brightness. I have a short petticoat on. In fact, I have two, and
if it wasn't such a hot day, I'd probably have more. The more petticoats you have on, the more affluent you are.
course.
And so the French always had a much shorter petticoat. I mean, it could go wherever, but the British would have it down
Yeah.
to the floor because they were much more, demure and all of that. And of course, a lot of them, especially if they were rich, could afford to change their petticoats, and poor people like us, well, every time we get the bottom of a petticoat damaged, well, it shortens up a little bit. And so that's why, the short skirts were really very, very common and popular.
Well, mostly too is that the French always wore their petticoats much shorter than the British. Actually, the
begin with.
British were the only ones that had it down to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
German and everybody else are basically mid-calf. Everybody thinks the miniskirt came out in 1960, but actually
Guess
in
what, folks?
1730, 1740 there.
History always repeats
Up in
itself. Don't
Quebec
you know
and-
that?
Yep.
Back Montreal, the unmarried girls were above their knees. And their hair was long, not all tied up. So
You know what impresses me so much about, and your people are charming, is your knowledge. You have to study it before you do it, don't you?
I think
And while
everybody.
you do it, you study it, don't you?
Oh, it's constant. You never stop learning. There's always something new to learn. And I think everybody in this hobby, I think, has been a history buff their entire life.
It's got to be true.
And you have to keep, every time you want to try something different, you have to research it, you have to document it. He spends a lot of time in museums looking at what their exhibits are and then reproducing them. An interesting piece that he picked up at Old Fort Niagara beginning of July was an 18th century mousetrap.
Come on.
Oh, yeah. It's
What
you-
the
did
heck
you
did
know
an
they
18?
existed?
No, of
Deadfall.
course not.
a deadfall trap.
Was it a deadfall?
It's called classified as a deadfall. It was just a big block of wood with a trigger mechanism on it, and basically the mounts went in there and he nibbled on whatever you put there, and this big block of wood come down and
Crash.
crashed him.
Oh, isn't that neat? So what, do you folks have other professions besides this wonderful hobby?
Well, we do, yes, we do have another life. And Nick's retired, and I work for a healthcare system. So you have to have something to pay the bills and to support your hobby, because this is an expensive hobby. We all own everything that we bring.
I know, isn't it?
A
It's
lot of
amazing.
people think that it's belongs to a museum or something, and it doesn't. It's personal, so that you've got to have a truck or a trailer to transport it. And with today's prices, well, you know what the price of gas is today. And when you get something that gets 15 miles to a gallon going downhill with a backwind, you know what getting the hills over here is going to cost you. So, we're have to be really interested in it and to have a love for it in order to participate, because otherwise it's very expensive.
And everyone we've talked to today, and we've interviewed several people, it's a passion.
Oh, I believe so.
It's a tremendous passion.
You just keep going and learning new things, and it's the people that you meet, and they have something else that they've just discovered, and they share it with you, and you share with you knowledge with them, and it's a constantly learning. I think every year, at the end of the year, you've discovered probably a dozen new things that you didn't know the year
So you
before.
do a whole tour, or do you?
Well, there's
Well, we belong to
Belong
Company
to Company
LaBeouf,
LaBeouf.
and they have a schedule set out at the beginning of the year at different sites that you would go. Now, with the 250th anniversary of the French and Indian War, there's a lot of these types of 250 events that we go to. So we also do educational programs, so that we're contacted by schools and school districts, and that they might put on a day or even a 2-day program where the students would come to different stations and learn about perhaps what a tinker does, or learn about clothing, or learn about the soldier and their uniforms and the guns and the Native Americans and what their feelings
So you
were.
get to share.
So we do a lot of education. Our group is pretty strong in education, and even when we come to events like this, we like to have exhibits in our own little tentage that we can talk people through. So it's a piece of sharing. It's like you say, a passion for sharing.
And it's a feel-good thing.
Oh,
It's a feel-good thing for me as a casual observer because I just enjoy meeting you folks and find out what makes people tick. Why would they make this unbelievable investment of time and money? And you've explained it.
Like you say, it's a passion.
And I think you like dealing with the public, and you gather so much knowledge. I think I can say for most people that do this is they want to share that with other people.
I think you always wanted to do this when you grew up, when you were little kids.
Well, I think
like
in
to
the back of
play
your
a little
mind,
bit,
it's probably, you've been thinking about this for a long time. You have a
so
passion
great to
for
meet
history.
both of you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much
Nice
for
to have
taking
met you
time.
too.
Now you got a good rest. You can jog the rest of the way.
Exactly.
Have a
We
wonderful
shall.
day, folks.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye. Well, we've spent so much time interviewing wonderful people and watching reenactments and tactical displays and so on that we wanted to reserve about a half hour for the museum, and we have about 6 minutes. So, folks, we're going to make the Cook's tour real quick here today, but we just want you to know that they've listed the French and Indian War, 1755 to 1763, the final chapter, and the 6-decade-long struggle between France and Great Britain for a North American empire. It says representatives of all the British colonies meeting at Alexandria, Virginia. 1755 named 4 objectives which had to be captured to secure victory: Duquesne, Niagara, Bonjour, Fort St. Frederick here at Crown Point. And here we are, without shots being fired, after the British tried 4 or 5 different times to capture this, and then the history moved on to the Revolutionary time period after that. This is a beautiful little museum, and just one more reason why you ought to visit Crown Point to see this great historic site. It'll be too late by the time you see this to come and visit us today, because we're here on the 11th day of August 2007 for the great reenactment commemorating 250 years. We'd like this kind of display because it'll give you an idea what the fort looked like. We've visited several forts over the last 10 years, in at least my segment of our little corner, and probably you and Bob Venn visited a couple before that too, maybe. All right?
I don't think we ever went to a fort.
We've been to a few,
Yeah,
and we plan to go to a few more if we.
Lennox to Chambly and Point South, right?
Yeah, and we hope to end up in Ticonderoga sometime and down there in Lake George. But this is what it looked like. And then over Calvin's shoulder is what it looked like, the map, and what it looked like in Lake Champlain, on Lake Champlain.
On Crown Point.
On Crown Point, right here. Well, everything's got to wind down, even the French and Indian War. And our program is rapidly coming to a close down here in Crown Point. Again, we want to reiterate, it's one of those wonderful historic places celebrating and commemorating a tremendously historic time in the formation of this nation. What a turning point it was during the French and Indian War back in that time period, and we hope we've at least given you whetted your appetite a little bit today, so you'll study some more about what happened during this time period and other time periods in our nation's history. We live in a fantastic part of the country, and this Crown Point historic site is one of those. 20 miles off the Northway at Westport, right? Yep. Come on down the road and find your way to Crown Point. It's easy to find. If you like to Google and noodle around the internet, you'll find they have a great website. You'll get a lot of historical information. Perhaps maybe, just maybe, we have inspired some people to become reenactors themselves. We've met reenactors from various states and countries here today, and everyone has that passion that we talked about the last guy and his wife, just a wonderful passion for learning about history so that they fit the uniform and know where they fit in the nation's history. Come on down and stop here sometime. We thank Tom Hughes and the staff of this great historic site for inviting us here. We have enjoyed every minute of our stay, and if we've just managed to convey a few seconds of that excitement to you, our listeners on Hometown Cable, that's absolutely wonderful. Don't forget, as I'm going to say at the end of every show, you need to support this program. It's viewer supported. Send your check, large or small, to Calvin Castine at Hometown Cable. That's 2 words, Hometown Cable on the Ridge Road, Champlain. If you have suggestions, Calvin or I would be delighted to talk to you if you are a business that can afford to underwrite this program and keep it going. And as Richard Daly says, pay a little bit of the gas money. We'd love to hear from you too. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for giving us ideas about what to do next. And speaking of that, who knows where we're going to be next time? For our